Hello there, and welcome to the entertainment headquarters. This is the second segment of a series I would like to call Into the Darkness. It's all about the good stuff, all about horror, all about blood, gore, you name it, that's what we are for. And joining me is a very good friend of mine, DJ Anubis. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Boogity bitty boog boogity.
Yeah, so for those that do not know, me and DJ Anubis do a monthly review on his channel, the Metal Tavern Radio YouTube channel and podcast. He's all about the good stuff, the heavy metal music. If that's your thing, head over to the Metal Tavern Radio. And also, he does a lot of amazing movie content as well.
Thank you much. Thank you much.
Anytime. And right now, because I'm a fan of vampires and he is an avid fan of the werewolves, we've decided to do both of our top 5 of werewolf movies and vampire movies. So, where would you like to start?
Well, since we'll probably be alternating, let's start with the werewolves. I think I was telling you behind the scenes that for me, doing my top 5 werewolf movies is a lot easier than doing vampires. In fact, once we get around to that, like at the end of it all, like I have like a list of like runner ups. Like it's really ridiculous how many vampire movies that I really enjoy, but trying to find top 5 was a bitch for me. You said it was easy. For me, it's like a monstrous task.
Yeah, I found it
So,
easier with the vampires. I've struggled with the werewolves, so I've done the opposite to you. I
right.
can I find it easier because I don't know. I just feel like vampire movies. It's weird. I just think vampires are seen as more like seductive and dark, where werewolves are seen as just more action packed and more like on the scary side. Where vampires are scary, but not on the level as werewolves. Werewolves just come out of nowhere. Vampires kind of slither in.
Yeah, and
Is
there's a
the
bit of romanticism with vampires. We
Yeah.
see it a lot. So even with the more watered down stuff like Twilight and stuff like that, you kind of just see a little more romantic vantage point of vampires and what they represent. There are a few films like 30 Days a Night that gets a lot more brutal and gross
Mhm.
and very raw with the vampirism, but a lot of times there's this romantic version of what they are and what they can do.
Yeah.
Well,
So let
do you want to start with your number 5 or want me to?
start from your five. Let's go from 5 to 1. So you out your top 5 up to probably what is your number 1 pick?
Okay. Well, my number 5 in the werewolf genre would be Ginger Snaps. I believe it's 2000 or 2001, somewhere in that range. In fact, you had in your intro clip from Freddy versus Jason the very lovely Catherine Isabel, who stars in Ginger Snaps. And the film is basically a modern take on werewolf and kind of dealing with the pubescent trials that a young girl, teenage girl would go through. Like they kind of deal with the menstruating part and adding a different dimension to her change as a werewolf and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I think at the moment I had seen it, it really was an instant classic for me. They did 2 sequels to it, which aren't bad. But the original is always going to hold a special place in my heart with with the originality of the film
Mm,
and plot.
yeah. Yeah, I love Ginger Snaps as well. That is probably one of my favorites. So I would probably rank that at the same level as you at 5. It did spawn a number of sequels.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if I've seen all of the sequels, but the first one is the one that always stands out to me.
Hmm.
So I would probably, if I was to have a 5 with werewolves, I'm gonna go with Ginger Snaps as well.
Okay.
My number 5 for vampires is a one I really enjoy, and it was probably one of the first vampire films I've seen that generally scared me as a kid, and that is Salem's Lot.
Mhm.
The original Salem's Lot for me is just a masterpiece in my mind. And I know it's one of Stephen King's more popular stories that he's come up with, and they're all currently in the making of a reboot.
Yep.
So Salem's Lot, I just love the whole idea of this town and the people there and all the mystery around it. I even loved back in the time, the effects, especially at the window scene where you have the kid and he's at the window and he's trying to get into the home, and then obviously the final reveal of the master. I just thought it was a well crafted vampire movie. So that
Mhm.
is my top five. My number five pick when it comes to the vampire genre.
Yeah, Salem's Lot was definitely a runner-up for me. I debated back and forth of putting it in my top 5. You kinda nailed it, but the thing about Salem's Lot that sticks out so much to me is that was a made-for-TV series, a miniseries, and, like, the fact that they were effectively able to, like, make it as creepy as they could, during that time, in the '80s, like, is just masterful. Like, you for a TV movie to do that, like, what it's actually scarier than, say, uh, the reboot of It. Like, I didn't really find that scary. So,
Mm,
Salem's Lot, based on a TV miniseries and making it like they did, just scared the shit out of me as a kid. Great story, strong, definitely one of Stephen King's best. Uh, but there was 5 other films that made my list, and like I said, I have a huge runner-up list, which, I could sit there and talk about these vampire films all day, but trying to narrow it down to 5 is like a bitch. So, at 5, I actually selected, I think it's 2014's What We Do in the Shadows. And basically, this is a movie that was produced by Takeshi Waititi, who also stars in the film. He's also responsible for movies like Ragnarok, Thor Ragnarok, and stuff like that. But the idea is that they've got these vampires who are being followed around by a film crew, and who are going to follow them with their everyday lives and what they do. And they're kind of goofy, these vampires. And there's actually one scene where they have almost a Salem's Lot Nosferatu roomie who stays down in the basement, who scares the shit even out of them. Uh, but it's just so tongue in cheek and funny, and they have these like rivalry with the werewolves that don't swear, so they're not swear wolves. And there was supposed to be like a spin off of that at some point, but I don't think they ever got around to it, or they're still working on it. But it spawned the TV series, which is also very good for those that haven't seen it. But yeah, so at number 5, I chose What We Do in the Shadows. I just thought it was so incredibly good and, really funny, still
yeah.
holds up. Did you ever see that one?
Yes, the film I've seen. I know that there's a television show which is supposed to be
Yeah.
really good. I haven't seen any of the show though. I would love to see it. I just haven't gotten around to it. But you're right with with this film itself. I like the dark humor in it, if I remember correctly.
Mhm, mhm.
Uh, and it does stand out. I never even thought of that as while I was putting my list together. It never came to mind, but I wish I had.
Yeah.
Like you see, there's
Yeah.
that many vampires and werewolf films. But yeah, that's a good pick. I do enjoy. I have seen that, and if my memory does serve me, I did enjoy it for the
Mhm.
most part. I just remember it had a bit of dark humor. It
Yep.
it in in a way it's like, I know it isn't, but in a way the humor's like slightly like something like Monty Python.
Yes. Yep.
That's
Definitely.
what, if that's what it reminds us of, and I love the Monty Python films as well. So that's your number 5 pick for vampires.
Yep.
So now we're going on to pick for werewolves, and for mine, it's a film that I've another classic film that I've enjoyed for a long time. I don't necessarily think it stood the test of time, but I still enjoy it because it's from my childhood. That would be Silver Bullet. I
Definitely.
thoroughly enjoy Silver Bullet. I love the concept of who is the actual werewolf, who was, if I remember correctly, the priest.
Yep.
And that for me was just like a whole something you would never have thought of. It stood out. Um, I loved the creepiness of it. I even enjoyed at the time and the costume design of the werewolf. I thought stood out. And today it might look a bit goofy or whatever, but I still thought it was a great design for the werewolf, and it was a great. I just enjoyed the film at whole, and especially like I said, the fact that you have this priest who is secretly going round as a werewolf, and then he's back in the church acting holier than now. It was totally different, and for me, it stood out within the werewolf genre,
Yeah.
and that's probably why I enjoyed Silver Bullet, and that's my fourth pick.
Yeah, definitely a good film. Corey Haim is wonderful in this. Even has Gary Busey as the crazy uncle, who's hilarious as usual. But yeah, definitely is a good movie. It actually sits on the outside of my top five. It's usually like six. There was actually a film that you introduced me to last year that was around seven now. It's called Viking Wolf,
Yeah,
and that's a very good film as well. Um, my number four though goes back to the '90s with a movie called Bad Moon, and it stars Michael Pare and Mariel Hemingway, and actually was written as a book based upon their pet dog Thor. And it's wonderful. Micah Pare plays the brother of Mariel Hemingway's character, and he comes back from a trip with his girlfriend after being attacked by a creature. Ends up being a werewolf himself, transforming, but he has to kind of keep it secret. So in the middle of the night, he'll go and chain himself to a tree and transform it so that he doesn't hurt anybody. Like he tries not to. Of course, Thor the dog is caught on that he's not what he seems, and there's like this battle of wills, and there's a lot of cool scenes in this. There is a bit of a we've talked about before with Samurai and them about the bad CGI part towards the end, but for the most part, the practical effects for the transformation and the werewolf look is amazing, and it's really a terrifying film in certain places. Great gore. So at number four, that's where it is for me. Bad Moon.
I don't think I've seen Bad Moon.
Got to check it out, brother. I think it's on
No,
some of those free apps.
no, I'll have to. I don't. I honestly don't think I've heard of. Well, I think I've heard of the movie. Don't think I've seen it. But like when you're a movie lover like us, there's millions of movies we've seen, but
Yeah,
then there's a million we haven't seen.
exactly.
But it's the way you've described the movie. It does sound very intriguing. So it
Hmm.
is probably something I will check out. Me top. Where are we now? Top three of it for
I'm
vampires?
on number four with the vampires. Have you done your four yet? I think you did, right? Or no, you didn't. You didn't do four yet.
No, no, I haven't done me fourth. So me fourth, and I love this movie. It's I love it for a number of reasons. The cast alone are gorgeous, and that's Queen of the Damned. Queen of the Damned is one hell of a good movie, and it
Yep.
stars the late great Aaliyah, who plays obviously the Queen, and she was phenomenal in it. I love the story. I love the cast, and it's just a sexy ass vampire movie.
Yeah. Stuart Townsend was brilliant as Lestat. I actually prefer him to Tom Cruise, and I'm not really trying to throw shade at Cruise. I thought he did an adequate job in interview, but uh, with a lower budget, Queen of the Dam kind of hits the mark more, as you said. Aaliyah is like a great like vampire queen, like her role, like for someone to come out of the pop star industry and do that role. Like we see a lot of celebrities and musicians come in and do acting, but very few of them can pull it off. And she actually did, and it's unfortunate that we no longer have her because I would have
Mm.
liked. Because you ever see Romeo Must Die with Jet Li and her? Did you see that one?
I think I have seen that. Yeah,
She
yeah, I
was
did.
pretty good
Yes,
at
I
that
did.
too.
Yeah.
So she was definitely doing pretty well in the acting world. So, but the
Mm.
story, of course, Lestat's getting bored. He wants to do rock and roll, so he starts becoming a singer. But there's like this allure of him being secretive and trying to out the rest of the vampire community, bring it out in the open, and they don't really like that. They're pissed off about that. So they end up trying to go to war with Lestat. But of course, Aaliyah is like almost like God at this point, who's released, and she's just like a devourer of souls, and that's kind of a big mistake that Lestat makes. But without getting everything away, if you haven't seen it, definitely need to check it out. It's a good selection on Mr. Lambert's part for top five. It didn't make mine, but definitely in my runner up for sure. My number four takes me back to around 1996, and I remember seeing the trailer for this. I forget what movie I was actually watching at the time, but they played the trailer. And then the tagline at the end is what made me laugh my ass off. It says, Vampires, no interviews. And this was, of course, for the movie From Dusk Till Dawn, directed by Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez. So, what's interesting about From Dusk Till Dawn is that it's both a cross between action and horror. So, you spend half the movie following the Gecko brothers between George Clooney and Quentin Tarantino, who are basically bank robbers. And, Tarantino's got like this mental illness where he tends to go off and kill people without really kind of realizing that he's just really lost. And so Seth, the older brother, has to kind of keep him in line as they're running from the cops. So, again, a lot of great action here. Then finally get to the second half of the film and they get to this bar called the Titty Twister. And that's a whole other world too, because you again big names. There's Harvey Keitel's in this, Juliette Lewis, um, Danny Trejo, uh, just so many
Harvey
masterful names.
Keitel's in this as well. Harvey
Yeah,
Keitel, is it?
yeah, he
He's in
plays the
this.
former religious father of Juliette Lewis and the son, who I don't know his actor's name, but um, they get to the bar, and of course, Cheech Marion, who is one of the, I don't know, he's like the doorman, and he's spitting off these crazy shit, trying to get people to come in. But eventually, they find out the whole bar is like fucking vampires, and so like they have to fight their way to survive the night. It's just really cool. The ending, which is really brilliant, set up like the two sequels and the series that came after it. But the movie's just really, really good. Salma Hayek is gorgeous in this film. The dance alone is one that you see all the time in memes and gifs. So like dancing with that boa snake, I can't. My tongue's always dragging every time I see it. So yeah. So number four, From Dusk Till Dawn, definitely makes my list.
Well, that is probably going to be one of my picks, if I'm honest, because it's just a classic. It's one of Quentin Tarantino's. It's one of, with him in it alone. It is a movie that stands out. As we know,
Yep.
he's a very good director as well as he can act.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's one of them vampire movies that 100% will always stand out because of its style and because of its humor. And I always remember the final scene within the movie where you see the back of where the Titty Twister bar is, and you just think they're in the desert, and then it drops over the cliffside, and then you see what's behind, and it's like,
Yep.
fuck
Exactly my
me.
point. That's the big like, oh shit. Like that's a very cool moment in the
Mm-hmm.
film.
So that for me, a great pick again for your number four. As for werewolves, we're on to number three. I'm trying to think. I did have one in my mind, but
Let's
I
be
don't.
fair. There's only three that can be top three.
I'm struggling to pick which one.
You want me to do mine first?
Well, I was going to say Teen Wolf, but never mind. I'm
Oh,
I'm
uh,
joking. That's not even a werewolf movie.
it is and it isn't, but yeah, that's
Right.
probably gonna be like outside the top 10 at some point.
So that's not even in the radar, the top 10. So I'll let you do your top three, like your number three
So
in
my
the
number
werewolf.
3, and I know this is actually Samurai is probably number 1. I think he's talked about, and that is Dog Soldiers. Fantastic film. Has a lot of great cast in it, a lot more unknowns, but basically you've got this platoon of soldiers out in the middle of the forest, these mountains, and they're doing military drills, and they're supposed to kind of like it's like almost like capture the flag. So they're going after another platoon as they're practicing their assault and all the other stuff that they do out there, and end up coming across their encampment, which has been savagely attacked by something. Turns out, not too long afterwards, they're attacked by the same thing, which is like a pack of werewolves. Thus, they have to like try to survive the evening. They get to a house. They're picked up by some chick in some random Range Rover, and taken to this cabin where they find out that's actually where the pack lives. So it's a lot of great like comedic moments in this. Like it's tongue in cheek, a lot of fun. The special effects are amazing. Certainly better than most of the werewolf films you see today. They didn't hold back, and I'm glad they never did any sequels of this, even though they talked about it. Just like it just don't need to be touched in that way. But certainly one of my favorites. And the minute I saw it back then, I think it was Sci-Fi Channel or something. I saw it on, and I just bought the DVD right away.
Mm.
Eventually, I had to go back and get the Blu-ray, but yeah, just so incredibly good.
Well, what you've selected to be your number three pick was my number two pick.
Okay.
And I've been contemplating what I wanted to be my number three pick, but I think I'm going to go with The Howling.
Okay.
The Howling is a classic. There's always been this debate which one's better, Silver Bullet or The Howling. And for me, I think they both should be in the top five because I think they're both incredibly good movies for the time. I
Hmm.
haven't really seen a number of modern movies like werewolf movies that have captivated the way like the classic ones have. Um, there's like the modern version of the Wolfman. I could have mentioned that one. There's Wolf with Jack Nicholson. That's fairly decent. There's Cursed. There's a handful of movies, and I've just been looking at a movie that I haven't seen, which I am gonna actually try and get to watch because I've never seen it, and that movie is because I've got a list of movies. Werewolves Within. Have you seen that one?
I have actually. Yeah.
Would you recommend that one?
Yes and no. It's not bad. I'll put it that way. I actually enjoy the greatest thing about it, of course, is the young lady who plays the main character, the male girl. She's the same girl that does all the AT&T commercials. So she's very cute. And she is funny. This is actually funny. I forget who the black guy is that plays the main character with her in the film, but he's very funny too. And like they had a good chemistry and everything. It's certainly it does a cat and mouse thing where you try to guess who's the werewolf and all that stuff. So it's not bad. Um, it may be one of those films that would make my top 10, just not really high up, but it's certainly a
Mm,
decent film. Certainly decent.
yeah. Well, I wanted to mention that one and another movie I'm interested in, which is The Wolf of Snow Hollow.
Yes.
I have never seen that one, so I just wanted to mention a couple of modern werewolf movies that I haven't seen, but that you potentially have because most of the ones on my list are the classics.
So
So
you
I
haven't
thought,
seen The Wolf of Snow Hollow?
no, I haven't seen that one either. I don't
Oh
think.
yeah, you've got to check it out. Got to check it out. It's brilliant.
Right, right. I fancied that one, but I just haven't had the in like you say, Viking Wolf was probably the
Yeah, I
latest
really
of the
enjoyed
werewolf
Viking Wolf.
movies,
That was your
which Yeah, I had literally just seen that advertised somewhere on Facebook, and I went,
Mhm.
well, I know Anubis is on into werewolves more than me, so I just sent it to you, and the next thing I know, you were reviewing it on your channel.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I
so,
think I
but
had
yeah,
done I'd done the trailer reaction and then it got released on Netflix. I think it's still there. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty good. And like you said, there's not many modern werewolf films that stand out. So when they do come out and they do stand out, I try to make it a point to do something on them so that people are aware of that.
yeah. Well, that's why, like I say, I thought I'd mention three that I had heard of, but I haven't actually seen as of yet. But like I say, The Howling is my number three pick. Alongside Silver Bullet, it's a classic. There's always been that duel between which one's better. I do think The Howling has probably the edge over Silver Bullet, but once again, The Howling is another very popular werewolf movie.
Hmm.
It's a classic. I can't remember the story that much because it's been such a long time ago since I seen it. But Silver Bullet, like I say, stands out a bit more story wise. But I always knew with this that it had kind of the edge over the Silver Bullet,
Hmm.
and it I think if I remember, the werewolf was a hell of a lot more scarier in this than it was Silver Bullet.
Yes.
But I
Yep.
remember, and that's what I like the most about it. You can create a badass werewolf that I'm gonna remember, then it's
Yeah,
gonna
I'm not
stand out.
commenting too much right now because that is still on my list. So,
So there you have it. Number three for werewolves for me is the Howling.
all right. Well, number three in the vampire world, I'm going to go back to 1974 with a film that not too many people talk about because it's not like your traditional Dracula story or stuff like that, but it's Captain Kronos Vampire Hunter and stars Horst Jansen, Carolyn Monroe's in this. Fucking gorgeous woman. Gorgeous. Everything she's in. She's gorgeous. Can't talk enough about it. Basically, Captain Kronos is like this vampire hunter who kind of trots around the countrysides on his horse, uh, going from town to town, village to village, killing vampires, and it's just very cool. He uses a sword. He woos all the women. It's really a great thing. Uh, if you would have asked me like 10 years ago, I don't know if this would have been on my list, but over the last decade, the more I watch it, the more I really love it. And the more I love the aesthetic about it. Kind of runs a little bit differently for vampires. So basically, the vampires are going around and they kill people, but it's like when they do, they suck their life essence out. So they age. So whoever the victim is, they're just aging to almost nothing. Like they're just
Mm.
old and shriveled. And so it's pretty creepy in that aspect, and just very cool to watch. I don't know if you've ever seen that or not, but it's definitely worth a watch.
I have seen it, but like I say, a lot of these are films I haven't seen in a long time, but I
Mhm.
still always appreciate them. But it does stand out. Um, yeah, so that's your number. Is it three
Three,
picking
yep,
vamp?
yep, that's
So
my
we're
number
going
three.
to my third pick in vampires, and my third pick in vampires is Fright Night. Not the remake, the original. I absolutely adore this film. Um,
Somewhere Joe Valley just loves you for that pick.
I love the movie. I love the idea of the concept of, you've got this kid next door and some handsome neighbor moves in and he figures out there's something freaky going on. He's basically watching a show that's like the male version of Elvira, the Mistress of the Dark, but it's an older Van Helsing wannabe,
Yep,
played by McDowell. Is it
yep,
Roddy McDowell?
yep,
Yeah,
yep,
he
yep.
plays Rod. He plays the this Van Helsing type character, and he goes to him for advice because he figures out that the neighbor is a vampire. and it's just an overall great film. The one thing I love and I still think stand out is some of the practical effects,
Yes.
especially when you see the transformation of him fully as the vampire, the neighbor. He looked scary, and in many ways, it frightened me more than the Lost Boys at the time.
Hmm.
The Lost Boys, that, see, here's the thing, there's that many great 80s flicks, 90s flicks. Uh, some stand out more than the others. And obviously, this had to be my third pick. I was contemplating with that and something else, but I chose this one over the other one because I just love the 80s and I love the vibe. I loved the concept, and it overall is just a fun vampire flick for its time.
Definitely. Yeah, I really one of the characters of that is Stephen Jeffries, Evil Ed. He's hilarious throughout that film, and definitely Roddy McDowell, top of the game. Very good. I think I watched Friday Night 2 the other day because it'd been a while, and again, still great cast, a lot of fun. So yeah, that's a solid pick. I'm not going to argue too much with that one.
So where we go now? Number two in Werewolves.
Yeah.
Well, you've spoiled it for me because I said Dog Soldiers was going to be my number two. So since I don't have a number two, I'll mention another werewolf film that was close to me number two, and that was a film I seen a few years ago, and it was. I'll have to look it up. I've got it on the tip of my tongue, and I was just about to say it.
Hate when that
Um,
happens.
and it was. I've mentioned. I'm trying to think of who was in it. The cast. Um,
It
the
wasn't
one
cursed,
film
was it?
I'll do a few honorable mentions. The original the original Wolfman will always the Universal horror movies one. That's the one that always stands out. Oh, that's it. The Company of Wolves. Have you seen
Oh,
that?
okay. Yep. Yep.
I've seen that. That was a good werewolf movie. I've mentioned The Howling. It has to be mentioned. It's a mixture of both worlds.
Yep.
And I'll talk about two films that are a mixture of both worlds. The Underworld series,
Hmm.
that is an action-packed series, but it has a mixture of the vampires and the werewolves. And for comedy reasons, I'm obsessed with the Monster Squad. The Wolfman's got nods. That scene, that's like a Wolfman film that combines a mixture of all the classic monsters. So them are just a few honourable mentions that feature werewolves. And Dog Soldiers was going to be my second pick. So let's move on to your second pick.
So my second pick for werewolves is the 1981 classic by John Landis, American Wolf in London, and stars David Naughton. And it's really kind of like one of the debates between this and The Howling, as far as like how people view these movies. Would be one or two. Usually those two are right up there. So American Wolf in London, you have David Naughton as American with his friend. They're traveling across the UK moors and come across, they're attacked by a creature. His friend is basically torn to shreds. Naughton's bitten, ends up in the hospital after the locals kill the creature that attacked him. So then we kind of follow David Naughton's character as not only is he healing very fast from his attack, but he's infatuated with his nurse. He's having like hallucinations to the point that he's seeing his dead friend who appears and talks to him as if they're still buddy buddy. And it seems that every time he ends up killing somebody, they also visit him. So he's got these corpses with like shit hanging out their face, like skin and blood. And they're telling him that he needs to kill himself because, he's just going to keep killing people. And he's kind of like not buying it. And eventually, one thing about this film is that the transformation scene in the apartment is like one of the best you'll ever see in cinematic history. Nice
It
and
still
long.
stands out. It still
Yeah,
stands out.
it's just so insane. Uh, how they did that. I mean, like again, it's like still one of the best you're ever going to see, and it's a great story. But it turns out like obviously I'm giving away my number one, which I'll get to later, but the difference between both films is this one has a little bit more of a comedic tone to it as opposed to the other one. And so that's kind of my reasons for why this falls to number two and not number one.
Hmm. Well, I don't have a number one because you've given it. That was my number one.
Well, you can always talk about it if you want to
Yeah.
go right back
Well,
into it.
I will talk more about what you've mentioned, which is something. As you know, these movies are classics for a number of reasons. They're classics because of the directors, because of how they are filmed, the cinematography, and all of the hard work that goes in. You get movies that were made in the 80s, 90s that still stand out. People still talk about the original Star Wars. People are still talking about American Werewolf in London, and it is down to how good practical effects were. And that's why I think a lot of modern films are never as remembered as the classics. For example, The Lord of the Rings is a modern age blockbuster series which used practical effects to make the film stand out. So it had miniatures,
Hmm.
it had suitmation, it had all of old school techniques that are still viable today. And here's a perfect example of how great American Werewolf in London is. They did the sequel, American Werewolf in Paris, which probably the majority of the scenes with the transformations was CGI,
Hmm.
and nobody really talks about American Werewolf in Paris.
No,
Well,
and the thing is, it's kind of unfortunate because on some level, I do enjoy that film. But obviously, the shortcuts with the CGI and actually the werewolf look is not very impressive either. So that's the two things that work against the film. But really, Julie Delpy and I forget the actor's name, but they were really good. Story's funny. They again they kind of follow that comedic tone with the dead kind of following the werewolf around, the guy who is the werewolf. But it's never going to hold a candle to the original American Werewolf in London. It's just not. It just
yeah,
can't. So
and one of the points being is the fact that you've mentioned because of the using the shortcuts, you do, and there's no like nothing eye catching compared to the original. The
mhm.
transformation, the CGI can't compete to the actual original practical effects.
Yep,
And so that's just some. It's unfortunate. I agree that that film had an all right plot. The cast was fine, but everything else just was against it.
agreed.
So you've done your top two werewolves,
Yep. So we are now to number two in vampires.
right? Number two in vampires. Well, I wonder what my pick could be. Of course, I adore Bram Stoker's Dracula, as we know. And so that is my second pick. I absolutely, you're gobsmacked by the looks of things.
Yeah, I fully went in thinking that would be number one. So you've
Nope.
got my interest peaked here with
Yes.
that.
So I very much love this movie. It is probably one of, it's not just one of my all time favourite vampire flicks, it's also one of my favourite movies of all time. It came out in 1992, directed by Francis Ford Coppola. It's based on the book Bram Stoker. It very much covers the book faithfully. There are some elements that I think the thingy, but I love this book for a number of reasons. Not book, the movie. The cast is outstanding. Every cast member work. It was Gary Oldman's first ever major Hollywood role. He had been in a number of things, but this is the film that I think got him on the map. And he only did the role because he wanted to work with Francis Ford Coppola, and he
Mm.
only wanted to do it because there was one line in the script that he wanted to see on camera, which I'm not going to go into too much detail about because I want to save a lot of my thoughts for a stream that we're doing
Yeah.
soon. But I love the movie, and just like American Werewolf in London, the other big thing about this movie is how the practical effects stand the test of time. And an interesting fact is when Francis Ford Coppola was in development of the movie, he hired a company and a group of individuals to do the effects, and they basically turned around and said, "We cannot do what you're asking for with practical effects. We're going to have to go down the CGI route," because obviously in the 90s it was like the development of CGI where things was really starting to come around. Like obviously when we had 1995 came around, CGI animation became the big thing after Toy Story, just like how Jurassic World kind of changed the tide with CGI films and really pushed the envelope.
Mm.
But because he didn't want to go through the CGI route and the team told him he couldn't, he fired them all. And then he hired his son Roman to do the effects, who looked at all these classical ways of filmmaking, like changing the lens on cameras and suitmation and miniatures and all the classic. Like I say, if it ain't broke, why fix it? It is more expensive, but it works. And as you know, one of my favourite scenes in this movie is when you see him chase after Lucy and he summons her into the gardens. And obviously, Mina comes round and he's basically seduced her. He's
Oh,
making
he's doing
posh.
much more than
He's doing
that.
much more than that. He's basically giving her a good time.
Mm-hmm.
And Mina's look, but it's when the cameras, he looks up and he sees Mina, and it's just that effect and the look on his face. And I don't know if he's meant to be a wolf or if he's meant to be part wolf, part bat, but he's like a grotesque creature.
Yeah.
And that scene and that image alone will always stick with me with how great this film is.
Yeah,
Uh,
the wonderful thing about that, and I'm sure that's part of the same reason why you still love the scene too, is that for whatever reason, Coppola utilization of colors worked really well because Lucy's in this like very flowy red dress like lingerie thing that she's floating out into the garden with. Not literally floating, but she looks like she is because it's windy and Dracula has this storm kind of brewing while the thing's going. Mina's in like more of a bluish, innocent color. Because Lucy clearly is very fiery. She's
mhm.
kind of like courting three different dudes. I think Carrie Ools is in there too. Uh, but yeah, Dracula's kind of like in his wolf form. He's able to transform from wolf to bat, various creatures of the night. And so he's kind of like having his grand way with her, Lucy, out there in the garden. Mina sees it, so he's like looking at her like, forget me or don't see me or something. And she kind of is like sleepwalking or whatever. But definitely one of the more memorable scenes. And the thing about Dracula now, the only weakness in Dracula, and I only disagree to a bit with you, as much as I love Keanu Reeves, I do not like him in this film. I do not.
Yeah, and there's a story behind that as well.
Yeah, so I mean, everyone else is fantastic. It's not like Keanu's not bad to the point that it ruins the movie. The movie's fantastic. It's a great movie. As you said, Oldman is amazing in this. He really ate up the part. I forget the actress's name that plays Lucy, but she really was phenomenal in this film. And Winona Ryder, fantastic. She was already kind of making a name for herself after Beetlejuice and stuff like that. Uh, didn't make my top five, but this is a film that I can watch over and over. And the horror aspect that Coppola is able to develop, like even after Lucy comes back as a vampire with the little kid in the crypt with Van Helsing and everybody there. Like that is horrifying. Like I remember how horrifying that shit was. It's just so well done and great gore effects, etc.
It is. That's why for me it is my second pick. My first pick, I think, is gonna shock you.
I have a feeling I know what it might be, but I'll wait. So my second is actually one that can be shared with its remake. It doesn't happen often, but whenever I make my top 50 list of horror films of all time, I have a few out there that have like remakes that I feel like are just as good as the original. But I'm going to stick with the original here. It's the 2008 Swedish Let the Right One In. And it's also, there's another one called Let Me In, which stars Chloe Grace Moretz, which is also a fantastic film. So basically, you've got a young 12-year-old boy who's been bullied at school. He befriends a young girl who's a neighbor, but she seems a little odd or off. And what he comes to find out down the road is that she's actually a vampire who's kind of looking out for him. So there are times that he's being bullied, and she shows up. One of the more infamous scenes is he's being bullied at school in the pool, and they're trying to drown him or at least scare the shit out of him. Like they're doing a pretty good job of drowning him. So all you see all of a sudden in the pool is like a bunch of red, and then some heads start falling. And it's really a crazy thing, but it's more about the wonderful thing about the film is it's almost like it's not just straight horror. You got like this sense of friendship that these two have and how it coexists and how the boy starts to kind of like look after her a little bit, knowing what she is, but he's like taking it upon himself to kind of protect her. Because I think eventually her dad or guardian dies because he knows what she is. But it's been a little while, but the film is just phenomenal. And like I said, the remake is equally as good. Check them both out if you haven't. For anybody who's watching this, definitely a film that I love a lot.
Yes, that that I did toss and turn whether to include that in my list because I do like that, and I'm like you, I do like the original. The remake isn't bad, but the original stands out.
Mhm.
I do worry when they announce remakes or reboots because I don't think they'll ever live up to the original. There's some that have succeeded but are still not quite as good as the original. And then there are those that are just a total just mess.
Right.
So on to a number one, Werewolves. Well, obviously my pick was American Werewolf in London. So I've mentioned a couple of honourable picks. So one movie I will mention since I haven't actually seen it, or have I seen it? There's that many. Uh, it was a film that came out a few years ago. I'm gonna look it up now, and I want to know if you've seen it. And this is me gonna be my honourable mention. Have you seen the film Red Riding Hood?
I think I started watching it a while back. I just never finished it. It wasn't really going. Oh wait, which one is this? Is this the one with Amanda Seyfried?
It is. It stars Amanda Seinfeld.
Okay, I've
Yes.
seen that. Yes, yes, I've seen that.
Yeah, there's that one I'd like to mention. There's the remake of The Wolfman, which had Anthony Hopkins in.
Benicio
Uh,
del Toro too. That style that was del Toro's director too. Like that's a very stylized. It was really nice. Like I saw that in the theater. It was really good.
I've seen that in the theater, and I
I'm
thought it
not
was
usually a big Wolfman kind of guy. I'm usually like the more wolf than man, but that
yeah,
was a great adaptation by del Toro in that.
yeah, and it was I think a faithful remake or adaptation of the original from the
Hmm.
Universal Monsters. And one more honorable mention is Skinwalkers. I don't know if you've seen that one, but that
Yeah,
one
it's been a long time, but yeah, I saw that one.
I have seen that one, and I thought Skinwalkers was fine. Was a fine film. It did the job. I've seen better, but that's just a three other werewolf kind of films that I thought I'd bring up.
Well done. Well, number one, no shock, The Howling. It came out the same year as American Wolf in London. Joe Dante was the director of The Howling and starred the lovely and talented Dee Wallace. Basically, Wallace's character plays a reporter who is granted access to a guy that they feel is like a serial killer. So as they meet in some shady ass porno theater thing, she's terrorized by a creature in there. Gets out okay. They shoot the guy. He's dead. Uh, but she kind of has these nightmares about it because he doesn't look normal because he got the kind of the backlight of the movie projection screen. And you can see there's like something going on there, but she can't really see. Um, so then, as it turns out, like eventually, they go are recommended to go to her and her husband go to a retreat out on this island, and it's inhabited by some other people there who are being seen by like a therapist or a doctor trying to get better. Turns out these people are all werewolves, and the therapist is trying to keep them from becoming the animal and let the animal control them. So just like it's almost like a self-help thing, to try to control their urges to, stay hidden from society, whatever. But eventually, just shit kind of breaks loose on there, and things get crazy. I'm not going to give a lot away because I do want people to check it out if they haven't. But when we talk about American Wolf and the transformation scenes, the Howling also has a lot of them. And one is just like so fantastic. You actually will see a portion of that scene in my trailer for the cinematic synergy. I have a clip in there from that. But again, the reason why I have the Howling above American is because the Howling is really just straightforward horror. Like it doesn't really dance around with a little. It has a little bit of comedy, but not enough to alleviate the tension that I like in a horror film.
Yeah.
So, depending on what you're going for whenever watching horror, some people like Cursed, like is actually a decent film by Craven. But it has a lot of that balance between humor and horror.
Mm.
And so I kind of avoid those most of the time just because like if I want fear and I want to feel fear, I'm just gonna watch something that's gonna instill that in me.
Mm.
And the Howling as effectively does that. So I really love that film.
I always think there's two types of horror movies. There's the one that has no plot and is just about the gore and the slashing and getting to the
Right.
kills as fast as possible. Or there's those horror movies that have a great story that instill fear in you. And it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be down to the the gore. Yes, I know the gore and the frights are more important, but it's like the ideas that they put into your head, and the things that make you feel the emotion. There's
Hmm.
like an emotional fear, and then there's just seeing fear, and then there's seeing gore on the screen. And I think a number of the films I've mentioned, some of them have been a mixture of both, where they've had a great terrifying story and made you feel fear, and then there's some that are just full of gore and blood and guts. And if that's what you're after, you'll get that. If you want a good story, a good emotional fear, you'll get that as well in a lot of these picks.
Yeah.
Um, so we are up to number one in vampires.
Hmm.
So there's a number of honourable mentions. You've mentioned one, and I like this not because it's scary, not because it's thingy. Get away, the cat's in the way.
The tail. It's a tail.
I'm transforming.
Yeah.
Look, me tail's shaking with excitement.
I'm waiting for your little ears to perk
So
up.
a few honourable mentions. It's not really scary. It's more of a story, a bit like how Bram Stoker's Dracula was. It's Interview with a Vampire. I do enjoy that. Not on the level of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Um, Another one I'd like to mention is 30 Days of Night. That's a brilliant, I think, Dracula vampire movie. Um, there's also Nosferatu. I don't know if you've seen the original. That's currently being remade with William Dafoe is the lead, which I think he's going to do a cracking job. He fits the mold of that character. I'd like to obviously mention the Christopher Lee, the Prince of Darkness movie. That is also an honourable mention. And obviously, since you're going to not believe this, but I was toying between two films as my number one pick. One idea I was going to pick as number one was Blade. Because I love Blade, but it's more of an action-packed film, but it is a vampire movie. But then I had to go back to tradition and back to what I'd like and just stick with what I like. And I think you know what it is. It's The Lost Boys.
Oh, no, I didn't. I mean, I'm not surprised, but it wasn't what I thought it was going to be.
Oh, what did you think it was going to be?
I thought maybe, because I don't remember what you really rated. I think you saw it, The Last Voyage of the Demeter. Did you see that one yet?
Yes, I did see that. And it's not what I was expecting it to be. You, me, and your lovely partner in crime, DJ Neko, hopefully we're going to get together and review that, and I have a lot of frustrations around that. Not some about the actual movie, but some about its release, because it still is not actually released yet in the UK.
Oh, wow.
My brother and me had to watch it at his. He does have an account for a streaming service over in the good old US of A, and I went to his and I had to watch it from his
Gotcha.
television there.
Yeah.
So I did get to see it, and it was on a decent sized screen, but it wasn't the way I wanted to go see it, which we're
Right.
going to get into more detail when we eventually get around to doing that review. But The Lost Boys, once again, I stick to what I know. It's a lot of, like I was mentioning earlier, a lot of these modern type vampire movies do not do it for me. They don't instill fear. They don't instill the kind of, things I love, the creepiness. They try to recreate it. For example, I think vampire films are becoming more comedic. We have the Nicolas Cage Renfield that came out. We had is it Day Shift came out with Jamie
Ethan
Foxx.
Hawke, right? Was in that too, right?
I think he was in that. So there has been a couple of attempts of making reasonably decent vampire movies. There was a one that I mentioned that I did watch, which that was a fairly decent movie. That was a part of Netflix as well. I'm trying to think of what that was called, but get I'll get to it when we finish this. Uh, but I do think vampires have kind of lost their appeal, because if you look at most of the horror movies of the current, I would say, last 10 years, it's always a possession movie or a demon movie. Like you've got
Right.
the Conjuring series, you've got that series, you've got the Insidious series. They seem to be the go-to thing in horror at the minute: possessions and demons and ghosts and ghouls. There hasn't, I don't think, been a big budget, decent vampire movie in a long time. And the last attempt was of course what came out this year, which is The Last Voyage of the Demeter, which hasn't fared well, because I don't think it was given enough promotion that it deserved. And I do feel it should have fared better than it has.
Hmm.
But sticking to what I know, The Lost Boys, because I'm going into a rant there. I've turned into Lady Fat Blood. In the
Well,
most
yeah, it's
beautiful, positive way possible. I do believe vampires need to get back on the big screen, and so do werewolves. Um, Instead of all this possession and demon shit that we've had for the last 10 fucking years. Stick to tradition and bring me vampires, bring me fucking werewolves. But Lost Boys, it's a classic. We know the story. This family moves in with their grandpa in this seaside local town. there's like these kids who are like the cool kids or the rebellious kids who are like the punk kids, and
The Corys.
yeah, the Corys, and the older brother wants to kind of get in with him. He falls in love with Star, who is like the girlfriend or of the leader of the gang, played by uh, Keith Sutherland's character, and it turns out they're not just rebellious teens on motorbikes, the vampires, and suddenly they end up going to war with them, and all hell breaks loose. In the
How's
final,
those maggots, Michael?
he housed those maggots, Michael. And you know what surprised me? I didn't see the end coming, and this is stupid. When you see um the mom, I think is that Dee Wallace as well? Played the
No,
mom.
I forget, but
Oh no, it's not Dee Wallace. I know who the mom is. It's just similar to Dee Wallace.
yeah.
She's been in a number of films as well, but
Mhm.
she's got a similar look to her. Um, she's in plays the mom in Edward Scissorhands, I think, is the one who plays who is
Um,
who is in The Lost Boys, who plays the mother. I'm sure she's in Edward Scissorhands. Is
uh,
the mother in that as well?
let me see here.
I
Oh,
could be mistaken.
Diane Weist is Lucy. So she's the
Yeah,
mother, Diane
yeah,
Weist.
and I'm sure she's in. Yeah, so and then obviously it ends with who our date turns out to be, who is just a geeky man who ends up being the leader of the vampires. That is one aspect of that film that even when I was a kid, I never seen coming.
Nope.
I think I just it really did shock me overall. But the one thing that will always stand the test of time, even more than the film, is the soundtrack. It's a stereotypical 80s soundtrack that just stands the test of time. I think sometimes people recognise that one song from the film more than they do the film itself.
Yeah.
It's similar to Bram Stoker's Dracula with the Annie Lennox soundtrack. A lot of people recognise that more than they do the actual Bram Stoker's Dracula, or if soon as they hear Love Song from a Vampire come on the radio, they instantly remember that movie. It's like they
Mhm.
go side to side. So, Lost Boys, 80s classic. I stick to what I know. That's my number one pick.
So I've got couple of films that I have. One I haven't finished watching. The other one I keep seeing on people's best of lists, so I might have to check it out. But the first one, there's this movie that came out around 2012 or 13 called Byzantium. It stars Saoirse Ronan and another lady as vampires. Haven't finished it yet, so far it seems pretty cool, but a lot of people talk about it. The other one is a 1979 film called Thirst. I think it's an Asian film, and I haven't seen it, so that's another one that keeps popping up on people's lists. As far as films I have seen and what made my runners up, you've mentioned a few of them: Salem's Lot, Interview with the Vampire, Dracula by Coppola. There's a film that not too many people know about called Innocent Blood. It's a very good film. John Carpenter's Vampires is a lot of fun. A lot of fun. Lost Boys, Fright Night, Blade, you brought up. There's also this film series. They have like at least one or two films called Stakeland. It's actually underrated. Very good stuff. 30 Days of Night, you brought up. Near Dark. And of course, Queen of the Dam, which is one that you also mentioned.
Mm.
As far as my number one, it is a film that fucking nobody talks about. And it's unfortunate because two of its main stars are John Malkovich and William Dafoe. And it's a 2000 film called Shadow of the Vampire. And basically, what it is Malkovich plays a director who is filming the original Nosferatu film. So he's hired actors to perform. William Dafoe plays Max Schreck, a theater actor who is also happens to be a fucking real life vampire, Count Orlok. So what happens throughout the film is as Malkovich is filming, people keep dying around him. So it's really funny because Malkovich and Defoe have this friendship sort of where they're working on this film. Only Malkovich knows that he's a real vampire, but his crew keeps end up disappearing, and so he has to confront Orlok throughout the film and say, "Look, I can't finish this fucking film with you eating everybody." And there's just like this sort of like underlying comedy about it. It's so underrated. It's hard to find it. I like try to recommend it to people. They can't find it half the time unless you rent it. But I need to own it. Like I don't know if I can buy it. I don't think it's even on DVD or anything. Have to check. But no one ever talks about it, and it's such a great performance by both these actors.
Mm. I
Uh,
have heard of it, and I
it's
have
actually
seen it.
produced by Nicolas Cage. So it's just one of those films that as I go through lists, I have to remember it's there because like it's so easy to forget about it because it just no one really talks about it. So
Mm.
certainly a very underrated film and definitely my number one.
Definitely, I have heard of that film. It didn't even come, like you said, it didn't even come on my radar to even think of adding it to the list. The
Yeah.
film you did mention was Vampires, the
Hmm.
Jonathan Carpenter one.
Yep.
That, for me, is another great classic vampire film. But when you're doing these lists, you're kind of having an idea of what you want and what you like, and then you kind of forget about ones, even though in the back of your head you're thinking about them, but you end up not picking the ones. Like I said, I mentioned Blade, and I probably would have considered Jonathan Carpenter's Vampires as well. I
Hmm.
think that's I think that's a bit underrated as well.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
It
I
is
mean,
for me. That's underrated
it's
for.
got a little bit of goofiness. I mean, you got Thomas Ian Griffith playing lead vampire Dracula, and then James Woods is phenomenal in this. He's hilarious, and
Mhm,
just it's a lot of fun. Some nice looking chicks in it and stuff
mhm,
like that. But
mhm,
it's a unique take. But you kind of say you can sit there and say it's a little bit more action, but it's got some horror elements in it.
mhm.
It's pretty
Yeah.
good. So
Another film that's now just popped into my head, and I don't know why I hadn't thought of it. Red Blood Sky on Netflix.
oh yeah, you were talking about that one.
That was a real that from. I've just said that they don't really make modern day vampire films. They made Tyrant before or werewolf movies. They don't really give them a shot. Well, not for the big screen entertainment anyway. But if anybody wants to see a modern day decent action packed vampire flick, that one has just come to mind. Red Blood Sky has an amazing story. It's set on a plane with a mother and a child who are trying to escape, and the plane gets hijacked. Shit goes down, and she's not feeling too good. She's got an illness, what you believe, but it doesn't really have an illness. She's trying to fight her hunger because she's secretly a vampire. And in the end, she ends up giving in to her tendencies, and all hell breaks on the plane. Now, if anybody hasn't seen it, it is available on Netflix. Red Blood Sky. I highly recommend that. If anyone has Shutter, or I think it's still on Shutter, there's a film called Blood Vessel as well, which is a fairly recent vampire movie set on a German war boat. I don't know if you've seen that one,
I've seen it.
Anubis.
Yeah.
So, as I said, there isn't big screen action um, vampire werewolf flicks that we've had in a while, but they're two vampire films recently that I think are well worth a watch.
Good deal.
Mm. Um, but this has been a lot of fun. Like you say, trying to figure out what could be your top five. I think we've had a fairly. I think your picks are way better than mine. Mine are all from the 80s or the early 90s. Yours have been a mixed bag, but that's the whole point of entertainment. That's the whole point of having opinions and having different tastes and
Yeah.
different
Your favorites are your
films.
favorites, as they say.
Ah, absolutely. But this is my friend DJ Anubis from the Metal Tavern Radio YouTube channel and podcast. Please give him a like, a share, and subscribe. He is amazing. His content is amazing. He is amazing. I'm just Kevin Lambert. You know who I am.
Kevin's amazing. He's so amazing.
Entertainment headquarters. If you like what you've seen, keep following the entertainment headquarters for more. Subscribe, like, and share. And this has been Into the Darkness. I promise to bring you some more in-depth horror content soon. But from me and him, if you like your television, you like your movies, and you like all things entertainment, give him a follow, give me a follow. Until the next time, have a good night.
Later.